Welcome again to Ian Chilcott Carp Anglers YouTube channel. If you didn't watch the first one, you might want to go back and watch that now. This might not make a great deal of sense, but the last time we spoke about how I knew about the brain tumour and how the operation itself went. And now is the time really to talk about what other things in my life meant, but how difficult it was to get my head around it all. The most important thing to me was that I was on my way home. St George's sent me to Frimley Park Hospital for, I think it was 4 days, just as a stepping stone to getting home, just to make sure I was firing on as many of the 8 cylinders that I normally run on. And yeah, once they were happy, I got myself home. It was an odd place to be, if I was truthful about it. It was more than I could have ever wished for to be with Lynn again. And when I got in, I went and sat in my little armchair in the living room of our little bungalow, and I just looked around and just thought how wonderful it was to be home. But it was kind of strange because I knew my life had changed. There's no other way of putting it. And I gave Lynn a hug, I think, that probably lasted for about 3 hours, I think. I just, didn't ever believe that I was going to get to see her again in that light. And things had been highlighted in the operation, and how near it had come to me losing the battle completely. I was utterly amazed. Mr. Stapleton had come and briefed me. This is about week 6 after the operation. He'd come up on his own onto the ward, which amazed people. But he was so happy with the work he'd done and the way I'd responded to the work he'd done. I think he just wanted to tell me himself how the operation had gone, how dangerous it had been, but how glad he was that it had turned out the way that it did. And after a couple of days at home, which I have to tell you were spent asleep, and so did the following 9 months. I'd probably get up in the morning at 10 o'clock. I'd eat a little bit of toast, which I couldn't taste. I'd try and eat a few other things, which I couldn't taste. I'd lost the ability to taste anything. I'd be back in bed by 2 o'clock. I'd get back up at 6. And I'd be back in bed at 8 o'clock in the evening and wouldn't get up until 10 again the following day. And that's the way that it went. All the time I was there, I just mentally did that lap of honour that I always talk about, naked at 500 miles an hour, my hair on fire, that I was alive, that I could still talk to Lynn, that we were still together, and still the couple that we'd always been. But I can tell you now, I couldn't help thinking about my fishing. Something that has carried me through what for me were the worst situations in my life, ones that I'd come across in the army, ones that I'd come across when Lynn had been ill so many times. I think she's had something like 40 odd operations, and I mean serious operations, all cancer related. And you throw in the fact that she's had a couple of big old strokes and she's registered blind, you start to get a handle on how ill she's been. She doesn't want the world to know how ill she's been, and neither did I, to be honest with you. But so many people were so interested in what I'd done, and it seemed to me the only way I could repay them was to go out and catch some fish and say thank you by putting them on the internet. It might sound odd, but it sounded the way forward for me. I was still finding it difficult to turn 1 and 1 into 2 at that time when I thought about anything. But it was coming together, apart from the sleeping, as I say. Eventually, after a few months, Lynn and I got out to doing some walking just round the block. The odd people would take us out and go. There was a good mate of mine, Andy Bradnock, popped round every now and again just to take us out for a drive, just to change the scenery and give me things to look forward to. It was wonderful. And I always, although I'm not, as I said before, I don't want to stand up like a mannequin in a shop window. I'm not that kind of guy. People are aware of Fox and Mainline in my life, and the loyalty that I've given them. And I was sat in the house one day, a guy had come round to visit me, and there had been a knock. We were having a cup of tea, and there was a knock on the door, and it was a delivery man from the post office. And in it, this big parcel came into the living room from Lynn, carried in by Lynn. And it was this picture of me with Charlie's mate back in 2017, but it's what it said up in the corner. With much love and best wishes from Fox International. Utterly amazed me, and I have absolutely no shame in telling you I must have cried for a good 10 minutes. It was such an emotional moment, but and probably unbeknown to them, such a lifting moment, such a moment that filled my heart with so much joy, and none of them will ever know exactly how much it meant. And on the back, it was signed by all of them, and yeah, it's something that will stay with me forever. And if I ever do spin off my mortal coil, they'll probably have to chuck this in the coffin and burn it too. It's a massive part of my life as Fox International have become, and along with Mainline Baits, it was another shot in the arm that gave me so much to think about. Now, I am very fortunate where I live, in as much as there are some lakes very close to home, and there was one that I hadn't walked round in hundreds of years, probably since the 80s, called Shorefields, and it's only 800 yards from my front door, and it was run by Farmer Angling, who very, very kindly gave me a ticket, and there was a young lad up the road, Stuart Dawes, who also had a ticket for, and now Stuart had become a good mate of mine. He's only a young lad. What was he then? Probably in his early 20s at the time, and he just got into carp fishing. I was helping him and his brother Cameron as much as I could, with advice, places to go, getting them in the odd bit of bait and stuff, and bless their hearts, they were loving every minute of it. Stuart couldn't have been more help for me at that time, and much against what people wanted me to do, the doctors and especially Lynn, Stuart and I made a plan to go and do a few hours down at Shorefields. I had no wish to catch a carp. I had no wish to stay there a long time. I just wanted to sit behind a pair of rods and maybe watch a kingfisher flit across the lake, watch the wildlife go about its business. If there was a carp, as they always are, it was going to be a bonus in my escape from reality. Lynn and I walked down there a couple of times just so I could find out the route and make sure I was confident enough getting there. And eventually she thought I was ready to rock and roll. Stuart came round one morning, and I think the only thing I can do at this point is let him do the talking.
It's his husband getting ready for his first fishing trip.
It's my first fishing trip in 3 months, and thankfully Stu Dawes is loaded. I'm only going for a couple of hours. He's got my rods on there, and he's brought the bait and everything else, and hopefully I'm going to go and catch a carp.
Enjoy that.
But this is the thing about carp, it's not always about catching a carp, it's actually being there, and in these circumstances I am the happiest man alive. So here goes nothing. I may be sometime.
Thanks, Stuart.
That's all right then.
Enjoy yourself.
We will, I'm sure we will.
That was my exit into the fishing world from my house. It was, the emotions were just unbelievable. I took a stick with me. I was as wobbly as hell on my legs, but Stuart had all my stuff on the barrow, and off we went. And when I got there, I don't know, it's it's as if somebody had pumped me full of adrenaline. I was so excited. I wanted to forget about all the things that were wrong with me. And of course, the only fish we saw on our travels around the lake were at the far side of it. So we had the furthest to walk. It's not a massive lake, 4 or 5 acres at most, and it's a beautiful, beautiful little pond. And we found some fish around the other side. So I had sort of the left-hand side of the area. Stuart got the right-hand side. Now, probably the biggest problem, and still a problem I have to this day, is your power of perception when you're blind in one eye. And I had absolutely no idea it would happen. Fishing with a leg clip and my favourite little PVA bag set up, I must have lost 6 or 7 leads where I just simply wasn't hitting the clip. It just seemed so strange to me. Eventually I got a rod on the spot I wanted it, where I wanted it, and I baited up with 3 or 4 bags around it. I got the other rod and I got it in a similar sort of area. I wasn't that bothered, but they went down with a little donk and I was happy. And we sat there and we talked about fishing and talked about the fishing I wanted to do, the things I wanted to achieve. Now I was back in the world, that I'd survived it all. I knew there was an awful long way to go, but like I said to him, it was just about being there. And 20 minutes after I cast out, one of the rods chirped into life, the bobbin cracked into the rod, and it absolutely roared off. And I had, there can never be a more memorable fight with a carp, or a more memorable carp that ended up in the bottom of my landing net. Oh, I have no idea what to say. Most of this is about my mate Stuart Dawes, who's carried my gear down here on his barra to a local lake not far from my house, and it's just the most beautiful place. Pads everywhere, just incredible. My rods have been cast out the first time for, I don't know, 3 months. They've been out there for about 20 minutes and I've got one. I don't know what to say. I'm not an emotional man normally, but I feel incredible now. A little comment. What it is, to be honest with you. That is absolutely incredible. The fish in this lake are so old, they're not big fish, and I really don't care how big they are. It's got absolutely nothing to do with the size of the fish. It's everything to do with catching one. Personal note, it's frightening to think what I've been through. It's so difficult casting out because I'm still blind in my left eye. I'm shaking more than I think I've ever seen in my life. It's just such an emotional thing. Mentioned my mate Stuart, who brought me down here, and a lot of the reason I'm in good enough nick to be here is because of a whole host of other friends. Carp anglers, Andy Bradnock, Adam Whittington, running my rifle in to and from the hospital. Drew and Laura from Cow City Livery, who've helped just so much to help me to get where I am, and to help them to take care of business. Another lad who lives up the road from me, Dave, he's just been, well, just above and beyond the call of duty really. things that picked up the other line. Okay. Yeah, they don't know when to give up in here, which is quite remarkable. Picking up this one. It's not meant to be easy, obviously. Unbelievable. I suggested on the way down, it's just being here that matters. In a lot of respects it is, but if you could feel how fast my heart is beating, you'd be amazed. And Lynn would probably get the blood pressure monitor out at this point and see if I wasn't spinning off my mortal coil, but hey, what a way to go if you do, eh? Unbelievable. Don't give up in here. Unbelievable fish. It's a beautiful common. And look at those. It's in the bottom of my landed up. How unbelievable. I left my house this morning just pleased that I was leaving my house, and I can't, well, emotional really, to being as close to spinning off my mortal coil as I was, to still be able to come out and catch carp like that. Doesn't matter how big it is, doesn't matter what flavour it is, it's the joy that they bring, and more power to his fins. Right, let's see if I can get my breath back and we'll take a look at it. Unbelievable. Carp fishing it saves my soul so often. I mention all the people around me who've helped so much with this brain tumour and my recovery from it. I didn't realise so many people would help, but the culmination of all that help is this little common. He's about 15 pound. I'm not going to weigh him. I don't think there's any need at all. It's what he represents is so important to me. Carp fishing on the most stunning lake with some of the oldest carp swimming around, absolutely fantastic. I've found it incredibly difficult being blind in my left eye when I'd deposited a few leads using PVA bags, and it was a while till I got it right. I didn't think I was going to catch anything today. It was simply a fact of putting my feet up and being here. But 20 minutes after I cast out, this fantastic, beautiful common ripped off with my upbait. As you've seen, we've got it all on film, which is quite amazing for me. I do most of my fishing on my own, but as I said, my mate Stu Dawes brought me down with all my gear. I walked down with a bloody walking stick of all things, but this was the end result, and I cannot even begin to tell you how happy I am about that. No matter how happy I am about catching a carp, I always feel the greatest bit is watching it swim off, which is what we're going to do now. I owe this carp everything, and I think it's a he, the size of his fins. An elegant No good. Who's that? I can only say that my fires have been relit well and truly, and yeah, I think it's not the final stage of my recovery, not by an absolute million miles, but I don't know how. Well, I was coming to the end of my 4 hours on the lake. That's all I could, all the time I could afford to spend. Physically, I feel like I'm falling to pieces, and probably 5 minutes before I was about to reel him in, one of the rods ripped off again. I caught a spanking little mirror. Again, they're not the biggest fish I'm ever going to go fishing for, but in the condition I'm in, they're just about as good as it gets, and I certainly don't have a bigger smile for any other fish I'm ever likely to catch. Incredible. It's only 3/4 of a mile from my home, somewhere I can come just for these few hours and maybe get another bite. For a lake with only maybe 80 to 100 fish in it, and 7 or 8 acres, and broken up as it is, I'd say that was a bit of a result, and certainly when you think about the condition I'm in. But I'm practically packed away now. It's time to head for home, and let's just hope I can make it there without a leg falling off or something, because that's exactly how I feel right now. But I couldn't be happier. What an incredible little fish. Just getting back in the pond, and thank you so much for making me so happy. It's very obvious, although the traffic from the A331, which is only 20 yards behind me, blinds out most of what was going on at that time. Once that went into the net, again, it was a massively emotional moment, something I thought I would never do again, and all the thoughts of the doctors talking to me about how dangerous it was, how near to death I had got. I mean, I was quite literally knocking on the door at points during it all, and there was a 15-pound common in the bottom of my net, and yes, I talk about it on film, but to talk about it now, it's such a memory. There will never ever be a more memorable fish than that 15-pound common. There'll be never one that can mean that much to me again. You know, I keep sort of weighing it up between Charlie's mate and that common, and you know, I didn't think I was about to spin off my mortal coil at any time soon when I caught Charlie's mate. I did before I caught that 15-pound common. So yes, he will remain at the top of that list forever. I have caught some amazing carp over the years, and there's no doubt I will get to talk to you about those fish over the coming months. But yeah, at that time I was looking at a carp in the bottom of my landing net. We took him out, photographed him, and sent him on his way, bless his heart, and I even managed to cast back out. I didn't care. Now, Lynn had given us 4 hours, and we had about 3.5 hours into our allotted time, and unbelievably I got another run. It was a tiny dumpy little mirror of about 12 pound. It didn't matter, we didn't weigh either of those fish. That was not the point at all, as it never really should be with carp fishing. It's about the joy of catching them that should fill all of our thoughts. And yeah, I got home. But when the 4 hours was up, I was utterly shattered, and I slept solidly and wonderfully for 15 hours, probably dreaming of carp all the way through. But yeah, it was a wonderful moment. But as soon as I was awake, I was planning my first night on the bank. And again, I was filled with just such excitement. It was almost childish. It was childlike. I just wanted to go fishing for a night. So Stuart and I got our thinking caps on, and plans were made. It's hard for me to talk about Lynn being upset about me going fishing. She has been behind everything I've had to do with fishing during my time in the army when I started writing around about 1996, all the way through. Everything you've ever read that I've ever written, books, articles, anything on the intro web, has been proofed by Lynn before it goes to the publishers, and I mean everything. And she's always been fine with me going fishing. It's you imagine what Lynn went through while I was in the army, tours of Northern Ireland, tours in other places, 3 months here, 2 months there. She was used to me being away, so a couple of nights a week was no drama for her to pick up on. But me going for a night after the operation was a different ball game completely, and I don't blame her. I know what I'm like. I know how over the top I can be about things, but once I get to be in my bonnet, I want to do it. It's the only way that I can function, to take another step. I don't want to sit down and think about it. I want to get on and do it. And the whole of my life has been driven that way. And it wasn't about to stop because of a brain tumour operation. And so Stuart and I planned a night. It didn't turn into the night that I wanted it to. I've got plenty of footage of the things we did there, and it was such a fantastic night. And I think it was about 8:30 in the evening. Unbelievably, I caught my fourth fish, I think it was. It was the smallest of the 4 commons I'd caught up to that point, about 13, 14 pound. I was so tired at that point. I was excited too, but I think the excitement was draining my batteries as well. And I reeled the rods in, tumbled into bed, and that was the end of it. I didn't know anything until 7 o'clock in the morning. If I was miffed about anything, which I wasn't really, it was the fact that I hadn't caught a mirror, and there were some gnarly old mirrors in that water, Shorefields, and I recast the rods, both from over the back of this little bar on the side of an island, only 25 yards cast. They went down perfectly, and we promised Lynn we'd be home by 10 o'clock, so we thought we'd fish through till 9:30, and unbelievably, an hour later, one of the rods keeled over, and I played and landed. I think it was just shy of 18 pound, a proper old mirror, and they are ancient in there. They don't have to be big to be old, and they don't have to be big to be special. And this was a very, very special carp. And again, we filmed it, and we laughed like a pair of kids. And I will never ever be able to thank Stuart enough for those 2 reintroductions for me back into my carp fishing world. They meant the world to me. But I am not someone, as I keep saying, who can just sit still. You'd think I'd go and fish Shorefields for a few months. All I wanted was to go and chase something else, go somewhere else in a different environment. The trouble is, I needed a driving licence, which I didn't have. I'd been taken off the road for what they said would be about a year. I was prepared to wait. I had loads of people. I would have had a list of 400 or 500 cars on a Monday morning to take me off fishing. But I bought a guy called Tim, who lives locally in Aldershot. He was the guy that turned up on my doorstep with his son in the van when they were off to work, and they took me up over the Willow Park. My friend Tony Smeets was involved in all that as well, and he was so wonderful over it all. And he had a lot more parts to play in the coming months and years too. But Tim took me up there, Tony took me over there, and I had a wonderful time at Willow Park. I caught on all kinds of crazy things, doing the zig thing, doing the loads of bait thing. I just kept on catching some carp, and it was all the therapy I needed. And one day I landed a £26 common, and I called it a new life personal best. I called it from a swim called Joe's at the other end when everybody told me they weren't eating bait. Red rag to the bull again, which is something you'll find out a lot about me over the incoming issues of Ian Chilcott Carp Angler. Don't tell me they don't work, because I will have a go with it. And I'd stuffed about 3 key of bait underneath this tree via my spod one day, and I caught this £26 common, and I sent it off with a little article to Joe Wright, my great friend Joe. We've been friends ever since he appeared on the carp fishing scene 25 years ago, and he put it on the front cover of Carpology magazine. It wasn't the greatest carp on the planet, but it meant the world to me, and it became a new life personal best, and that was something that was going to carry me on for a little while. It was, every fish was another step up a ladder that I was trying to climb, and I'd done the Willow Park thing. I wanted to carry on. I would be going back to Willow Park, because as much as I was thinking things were just getting better and better on a daily basis, I could have never known that things were starting to get worse, and I had no side effects of anything. I didn't know anything was going on, so all I thought of was the future. All I could think of was getting my driving license back, and unbelievably, because of my fitness reports, if you want to call them that, all my medical history through the operation, the way I'd reacted to things, DVLA offered me my driving license about 6 weeks earlier than they should. I chewed their arm off for that little sucker, and when it came back, I cannot I did have a free fall accident many years ago, and when my main canopy failed to deploy, and I had to deploy a reserve parachute, and that is exactly the same feeling I got when I pulled that license out of an envelope and permission to go. It was unbelievable, and there was only one place I wanted to go, and that was up to Hollybush, which again is just round the corner from my house, up on the A331. I'd been there a few times. Tim and Tony Smeets had been taking me up there, and I'd caught some amazing fish. The first time I went there, I remember getting in Tim's van, and I said, there's only one fish I want to catch when I go to Hollybush, and that's the mid-20 fully scaled. And the guys, as much as they wanted to help me, I needed to push my own barrow, and I pushed my barrow down what's known as the road bank there. Halfway down, I saw a fish show. I left them for about an hour so they'd move on, do whatever, till I didn't see any feeding activity at all. Set up the normal thing, 10-15 mil hybrid boilies, and about 3 key of them. And an hour and a half later, one of the rod tips arched over. I had a belting run, an amazing scrap in all the weed that gets itself around Hollybush, and in the bottom of my net was that fully scaled that we'd been talking about. And it's amazing how carp fishing can do that kind of thing, and Hollybush had given me so much, and it was wonderful to drive through those lakes in Daisy, my little van, and go fishing for myself. It's something that, through all the friendships that I have, as I said before, I'd have had 400 vehicles waiting for me outside my front door if I wanted to go fishing. The urge was to go fishing on my own, to escape on my own, as fishing has allowed me to do, to get over the trials and tribulations that the army played on me. And as I said before, Lynn's illness and now my illness, to do it on my own it's not the final hurdle by any means, but it was a massive hurdle for me to get over, and that freedom was utterly amazing. And the world wasn't quite my oyster. There was a lot of things I had to sort out, but I was still here. I was driving, and the carp needed to take cover because I was coming for them wherever that needed to be. Now, having my driving license back gave me the opportunity almost to do the one thing that was only second to seeing Lindy after the operation. Lindy was the most important thing that I saw Lynn after the operation, and I will never be able to explain that moment, but I needed to see my mum. All the way down there in Plymouth, during the course of all this, 6 weeks after the operation, my father had been taken into a home. He'd suffered from dementia, a very rare kind of dementia, unbelievably, and he'd been taken into a home. And my mother was suffering terribly, living on her own, and she was getting help from all over the place. But I just needed to see her. Everything in my body was driving me to go and see my mum, but I didn't want to drive until I thought I was ready for the journey, and this has happened a few times on the things that you're going to have heard about and are about to hear about. I didn't start driving necessarily when they told me I could. After things, I'd wait a little bit more. I don't mind if I wake up with a couple of broken legs in a hospital bed, but I don't want to think I killed the two kids in the bed opposite me. I worry about other people. So I wanted to find out if I could drive those distances, and one person who massively came to my help was a very old friend of mine, Richard Stangram, up on Hook Lake, right at the top of the M25 there, and he runs this tiny little lake, 2.5, 3 acres, but it's stunning. It's like a red mire. In fact, I gave it the nickname Green Mire, and I thought if I can get to Richards, it's about 1.5 hours from home, and I can fish and drive home, then I'm ready enough to go and see my mum. Now, I did a couple of trips up there. I did a charity event up there with Tim Paisley. I drove up the night before it started. Had a wonderful night chatting to my old mate Tim. We did some fishing. I managed to even catch a couple of fish, and I utterly fell in love with the place. I went up filming with Harry Charrington and Brad Walker from Fox. Caught some carp off the top out of there, which people said was impossible, and I just loved every second of it. The one thing it did do, thanks to my mate Richard Stangram, was tell me I was ready for the trip to Plymouth. So one day, after I'd slept for God knows how many hours, Lynn and I packed my big old yellow truck and headed off to Plymouth. It took a long time to get there, believe you me, but I was driven by the thought of seeing my mum. I hadn't seen her for so long, and with all the problems she'd had and the problems that I've had, it just got more important on a daily basis. And I was excited. I was genuinely hugely excited. We pulled off the motorway there down onto the A38, all the way down into Plymouth, out towards Tavistock, Glenholt we were headed for, and the nearer I got, the more nervous I got about it. And when we walked through the front door and the three of us met in the hallway of my mum's house, we stood there for about 20 minutes, and we never said a word. We didn't stop crying and hugging each other, and yeah, it was one of the greatest moments I will ever have. She is an incredible woman, my mum, and it just, I don't know, it just, one of them moments is indescribable. And to see her, when again, it's thought of something I'd never ever do again, and I did. It was another thing that I could tick off my list of amazing things to do. And we stayed there for a couple of days, helped my mum out with quite a few of the problems that she had, and then we had to head back to the real world. But as moments go, they don't get. There isn't a moment that could get more emotionally charged than that. But do you know what? On the way home, I couldn't help thinking of going back to my Essex syndicate and doing some fishing down there. So when I got out the truck, we'd unpacked it and everything, I started to sort my tackle out, and just as soon as I was able, making sure I'd had enough sleep, of course, I was Essex bound.